the military sense of the word, special operations in wartime involves three primary missions. Now, all take place behind enemy lines, normally deep behind enemy lines, and by deep in this case we mean at least 30 miles. Special reconnaissance is going back and looking for enemy forces, looking for infrastructure. Direct action are raids conducted either air, sea, or land by any of the components of the Special Operating Forces. And finally, unconventional warfare is organizing guerrillas behind enemy lines. So those are the three wartime missions. In both peace and war, they're responsible for counterterrorism. The Special Forces are known for using unconventional techniques, but the fact of the matter is these techniques are as American as apple pie. If you look at what the settlers who first came to this country faced in fighting the Indians, they were totally confused because instead of standing and fighting like they'd expected, the Indians would use silent infiltration. They'd fought at night, they'd attack, and they'd retreat. Well, the settlers learned very quickly. All of us are familiar with Rogers Rangers, and we're familiar with the legendary Daniel Boone, and there's a great heritage, if you will, for our Special Operating Forces.
Though it debuted on the MSX in 1987 as an early pioneer of the stealth action genre, it wasn't until the 1998 release of Metal Gear Solid that Hideo Kojima's production team began their run of revolutionary historic masterpieces, redefining the medium as a burgeoning field of interactive narrative art in the process.
In this miniseries, we'll take an in-depth look at each MGS title in turn, with an emphasis on how these games use mechanics as a function of narrative. Since in many ways the story of MGS is also the story of video games, we'll also see how the medium has grown from a form of entertainment to a unique contemporary field of visual art and design.
The gameplay fundamentals of MGS1 really aren't much different from the MSX eras. The object of the game is a bit like hide and seek. You're trying to remain hidden, but not only for story reasons. The enemy will always outman and usually outgun you, so it's in your best interest as a player to avoid detection as much as possible. For the majority of its playtime, levels and sequences resemble the Mario model. There may be secrets and multiple paths, but largely each area or stage is an interactive puzzle with 1 to 3 possible solutions. The core dream of the series is an interactive, responsive environment where every strategic decision carries weight. There's degrees of survival elements at play to inventory preservation. If you chew through rations and neglect to watch your ammo supply, you may find yourself scraping by boss fights and hitting a wall of restarts. Arguably, the greatest influence on the creation of 1998's Metal Gear Solid was the PlayStation console itself.
プレイステーションという、ハードの噂が聞こえてきまして、どうやらですね、家庭用で 3D ポリゴンが扱えると、もう当時で言うと夢のような話なんですけども、でそれを聞いた時に最初に浮かんだのがメタルギアですね。
The jump to 3D and the Sony brand both fostered a new environment and audience for games, since 3D gave developers extensive control of the camera, and since the CD format allowed for a comparatively large degree of cutscenes, voice acting, and music, video games became a fully fledged medium of visual storytelling on par with cinema, at least in terms of its capabilities. MGS1 was an attempt to hybridize the form with film, and push the limits of the technology through creative problem solving. It was rendered entirely with polygons instead of using the occasional pre-rendered full-motion video cutscenes like many of the era's JRPGs. Static camera angles were used to predetermine how a given perspective would be framed. But Metal Gear Solid's brilliance is not in mindlessly reproducing Hollywood action tropes.
It was well written. You know, there were character interactions that made sense.
You know, it's Japanese. It's weird in places, and not only that, but it's so highly detailed in its research about genetics and the military and all the weaponry and all that stuff. So, you know, I could tell that the writer was, you know, a brilliant Japanese obsessive-compulsive researcher who was really trying to say something.
ソリッドシリーズはその、親から子に何を伝えるかっていう次世代に伝えるものっていうのが大きなテーマなんですけども、最初の時は一番分かりやすいものは何かというとその遺伝子ですよね。やっぱり遺伝子を残すために、生殖活動があって、こう育ててっていうのがそういう輪廻が繰り返されるので、そこにスポットを当ててあらゆるキャラクターとかストーリーとか伏線をその遺伝子という一点に集中させるような作り方を。
Yes, they fought savagely, for they were a primitive people, and self-preservation is a primitive instinct.
In most of these kinds of movies, we find more than mindless fun.
Now, nothing will interfere with voyage to Tokyo.
If we look close enough, we actually may discover glimmers of American culture reflected through the prism of Hollywood. This is the emergency broadcast system. We are under attack by conventional forces of the Russian army.
There's no identity in the United States or Great Britain. He does not exist.
Secrets have a way of coming back to haunt you.
There's a hostage situation on Alcatraz.
You could even argue these movies contain a degree of propaganda.
This thing could park a couple of hundred warheads off Washington and New York, and no one would know anything about it till it was all over.
He posted a letter to Admiral Yuri Padorin in which he announced his intention to fire his missiles on the United States.
We sail into history.
They assert patterns of thinking, which people later often apply off the silver screen and onto the less than glamorous or fictional events of real life.
Sean Connery, Alec Baldwin, Sam Neill, Scott Glenn.
Operation Iraqi Freedom.
By providing a context or set of rules and conventions, fiction can shape reality, arguably, by shaping how a culture comes to interpret or understand its own reality. So if a single culture should come to dominate the entire world, life on this planet and all of tomorrow's history will fall under that context and be explained by the patterns that this monoculture would create. Which is why Metal Gear Solid was created to become much more than an action military shooter or simple pseudo-Hollywood blockbuster. Ironically, what MGS appears to be is the very thing that it most critiques.
Sir, aren't these tests kind of easy?
Suicide mission.
Metal Gear Solid.
PlayStation.